inside of the jar is one more place that's less strong, especially in a pressure canner. So you save your better jars and your what I call regulation canning jars for pressure canning, and use your mayonnaise jars and your recycled tomato sauce jars for your water bath because they don't create as much pressure. But always use a plastic knife and not a sharp knife. It's easy when you're working in the kitchen and you've got your knife right there to just poke it around, but for safety it's better to use a plastic knife.
And why do we need to pack it and get all the air bubbles out?
Because the air bubbles are something that will, if you leave them in, it will cause your food to float. And in floating food, there's nothing wrong with the safety of it, but it just looks funny, and it also means that you're wasting space in your jar. The other thing is you need to remember to always use head space. And when we mean head space is that space between the lid and the rim of the jar. And as you see on these vegetables, they all have the regulation at least half an inch of head space. If you overfill your jar, it won't seal properly, and it's also apt to go bad and end up popping your lid and having a mess on your pantry shelf. It'll look fine for a while, and then it just gradually says, okay, you know, there's too much here. We got to do something with it because there wasn't enough headspace in it for the vacuum seal to happen. The other thing is, and you'll notice we've got rings on these jars because we transported them into the library today. Whenever you're transporting jars, whether you're moving to a new home or if you're taking them to Grandma's for Thanksgiving dinner, put the ring back on it to keep the jar so that it won't break the seal in the process of transporting. But take them back off when you store them.
So no ring when they're in storage. But you want your ring whenever you're transporting.
Exactly. So do you think, is there anything else we have forgotten today about pressure canning that we might need to let families know about?
Well, I do have a question. When you open your pressure canner after you finished canning, should there still be the 2 inches of water at the bottom?
There may not be quite 2 inches, but there'll be some water in the bottom. Now, one of the things I didn't think to mention was that this is an old canner. I mean, my great-grandmother has been gone for probably 30 years now. And so is that one way to check this before you get cans in there is to put the water in it and then put the lid on and bring the water up to a boil and see if you get any drips. If you get drips, it means you're going to have to stop and go get a new gasket. Or you might, and I've done this especially at 11 o'clock at night when the hardware stores aren't open, is that I've actually taken the gasket out and washed it because there was a little bit of calcium deposit on the rim. And so by rewashing the lid and the rim and trying it again, as long as you don't get drips around your pot, you know that your pot is pressurized in the correct way. And so that makes it easier. And if you don't turn it on high, you're not going to have to worry about this. This is the safety valve, and this is what the stories are about, is that they've turned it up way too high, and the pressure's got to go somewhere. And so what happens is that this plug pops out and goes into
medium high.
Medium high. High heat is not necessary for, we don't really need high for anything, except if you want to make charcoal food. And so that works that way, but you will have some moisture in. You may not have as much, but you may still have some water in the bottom, but it won't be as much. And sometimes when you're using water in your vegetables, you want to use either distilled water or softened water because of the fact we have so much calcium in our water here in this area that it will leave a white, cloudy solution in your jar, or it will leave white marks on your jars. And it's not food safe, it's not a problem, but it just looks funny. And so one of the things I quite often do is, if I'm doing a lot of pressure canning, is that I put just a tablespoon maybe of vinegar in that 2 inches of water in the bottom, and that automatically softens the water. And then that way I don't have to deal with remembering to get a gallon of distilled water, you know, and all that kind of thing. That just a little bit of vinegar in the water itself will soften the water so you don't get the white marks on your jars.
What do the white marks look like?
It's like a glass that's real cloudy. You know, sometimes you want to have a drinking glass that you've used a lot and it's clean, but it's got a real cloudy white cast to it.
So
and that's just a calcium buildup.
It's food safe, but...
It just doesn't look as pretty. And so that's part of that process as well. And so but a canner like this can run as high as $80 to $125. brand new. So, you know, it's a kind of thing that you really don't want to buy unless you know for sure that you're going to want to do pressure canning, that you're going to have access to the food, good quality food to do the canning. And it might be something if you've got a friend or a sister or someone to go in with. If you buy one from a garage sale, check the seal by doing what I told you with the water. But if it does leak, you may need to get a new seal. Some of them have gauges on them already. I would recommend that you be careful with those because those are hard to tell whether there is a special tool that you can use. You can call either of the main hardware stores here in town, and they can send the lid off to be tested.
Oh, okay.
But it depends on how far they have to be sent out and that kind of thing. Some of the extension offices in our area have the pressure canner gauge tester.
Oh.
We do not have it in Bloomington because it has to be recalibrated every time you use it, and it takes anywhere from an hour to 3 hours to calibrate it.
Okay.
And I can do a lot of other things in those 3 hours.
Right.
And I don't want to be held responsible if I should make a mistake and have somebody have a canner that's not working properly to end up with food that would be contaminated and cause someone to be sick, because I don't want anybody to get sick because of my mistake.
Yeah. So the way we check pressure on our canners in Bloomington, if we want to check it, would be to call the hardware store.
Exactly.
And see if they can get it checked for
Right,
us.
exactly. Because they have the newest methods from the manufacturers who will then take that testing, where the generic tester is a generic tester.
Okay.
And if it gets moved, it's got to be recalibrated. And, of course, it gets put in a cupboard for storage, and that means it's been moved. So, but you can get all this kind of information and really follow the guidelines of your recipe books or your pamphlets. And there's no danger involved in it. It's when you don't pay attention to the rules and you try to get in a hurry that things become unsafe.
So if you're someone like me who, when you are cooking, you don't use recipes, and now you're canning, you definitely want to use the recipes, or else you're going to end up with some non-food safe food.
Exactly. And once you've gotten into some practice of doing this, you can adjust them a little bit, but I know I hate to throw half a pepper away if I'm working with salsa. And so why not slice it up and put it in? Well, that means I've added more basic to the recipe, and I've changed it just enough that if I don't have my litmus paper there to check it to make sure it's still acid, I'm wasting food and wasting time and possibly and potentially causing someone to get sick. And that's not worth a trip to the emergency room to have your stomach pumped.
Right.
So we just need to remember to follow the safety rules, and it can be a lot of fun. It's really rewarding, and if you have access to free food, why not put it by?
Right.
So this is Sue and Stephanie checking off and hoping that you enjoy your pressure canning, remembering low acid foods. Pressure canning can be great fun. Remember not to put it on high heat, and you'll have a safe experience with the whole process. Thank you.